You know, the average person spends over 6 hours a day looking at their screen, and many of these people don't feel good about how they're using that time. There's lots of technology out there that is meant to address this type of thing. Things like dumb phones, even apps that simplify your phone, or return to retro technologies. But one of my favorite ways to interact with the smart world mindfully is through using e-ink. I've tried out a bunch of different e-readers over the past 8 or 9 years, things like Kindle, Kobo, Boox, and even this old Sony e-reader that I have with me now. There's a lot of claims about what this e-ink technology can do and how beneficial it can be for your eye health and potentially even for digital minimalism, and I wanted to investigate that for myself. So a few months ago, I reached out to the company Boox as well as Bigme, and I asked for one device from each of them so that I could do a week with only e-ink devices and see how that impacted my eyes and potentially my mental health. So Bigme sent me their HiBreak Pro e-ink smartphone, and Boox sent me the Note Max e-ink tablet, and I was off to the races. I've tried devices from these companies before, but I wanted to try these two in particular because I thought that in conjunction I could pretty much cover all of the bases that I need for interacting with the smart world day to day. Now, this isn't so much a review video on these two devices, even though I will do a little bit of a review at the very end of the video. More of this was to try using e-ink exclusively for an entire week and see what the benefits really were. So the first thing I noticed from going full e-ink for an entire week was I generally spent a lot less time online. Now, I think this goes for pretty much everyone who consumes content online, but in my case, most of the stuff that I'm looking at that's really racking up the screen time for me is going to be visual content. It's going to be things like YouTube. In my life, YouTube has basically become the TV that I watch. If I'm going to watch any sort of visual entertainment, it's pretty much coming from this platform. But just like somebody binging their favorite Netflix show, you can definitely rack up a lot of hours on this platform if you're not careful. And using e-ink was a good way to completely cut that off at the knees. E-ink is not good for moving visuals. I'm just going to say full stop. We have not gotten to a point, and I honestly don't care if we ever do get to a point where e-ink is good for moving picture, it's not. Back when I did my minimal phone review and I compared it with the Boox Palma side by side running YouTube, you could see that both of them didn't look good. Neither was really a winner. The minimal phone was a bit worse, Boox was a bit better, but I wouldn't want to watch any YouTube for a long period of time on either of those devices, and the same goes for these ones as well. Especially doing video on any type of e-ink device, you are essentially getting an Etch-a-Sketch experience, so please keep that in mind. The refresh rate is important because the Boox stuff, especially really high refresh rate, and I notice when I'm going like this scrolling on a site, especially on something like the Palma, is it's moving so fast and it's really able to keep up with scrolling, and it doesn't feel any different when you're scrolling through a news article or anything like that than if I was doing it on a standard smartphone. It really does keep up. But when it comes to video, an e-ink device of any refresh rate just can't keep up to what a smartphone can do, and I don't think that's a bad thing, once again, but it's just something to keep in mind. E-ink technology was invented for e-readers. It was supposed to look like ink on a page. It was meant for reading text. It's not meant for video, and that is not where it excels at all. And like I said, I imagine that's where most of us are racking up our screen time. So if you do switch to an all e-ink setup, you can expect that screen time to plummet. Again, YouTube can be used if you're trying to get through some quick instructional thing. If you just want to listen to it, obviously you can still do it on something like this. But if you really want to get the visuals from something that you're looking at on YouTube, you're not doing it on any of these e-ink devices. It doesn't really matter what brand you're going to get. It's not meant for that. With social media, I honestly didn't bother putting it on either of these devices. The reason that I didn't really want to have those things on here, it's very similar to the YouTube thing. It's the fact that Instagram is once again a very visual medium. I wasn't going to put that on here because, again, if I wanted to actually see any of the visuals, like I follow some photographers on there, I'm not going to get a picture of what they're actually posting. I'm not really going to get the full idea of it, the full scope, looking at an e-ink screen. The other thing I use social media for, which I do find beneficial, is Facebook Marketplace, because I buy most of the things that I own secondhand. I buy almost everything secondhand, honestly. And Facebook Marketplace has become one of those #1 spots where I find good priced secondhand goods. And yes, if I was going to go permanently for the rest of my life all in on e-ink, I would have to put Facebook Marketplace on here because it is a tool that I use. But again, I don't think that e-ink is really the right tool for that job. For me, looking at Facebook Marketplace and having to inspect used items before I even bother going across town to pick it up or even out of the city to go pick it up, I want to get a good sense of the actual condition of this item, and the photos are very important there. Once again, looking at it from an e-ink screen, you're just not going to get that detail that you are on a normal screen. It might look kind of nice, it might look interesting, but it's not going to be realistic, and you might miss dings and dents and other things that you would have noticed if you were looking on a standard screen. But like anything, there are positives to this as well, because Facebook Marketplace has at times for me been a time suck and a money waster. So not having it on my devices for a whole week was a relief to my wallet. The other reason for not putting social media on here as well was just the fact that the e-ink kind of allowed me to lean into my philosophy of using this kind of as my dumb phone with smartphone capabilities. You know, if you haven't heard of the Bigme HiBreak Pro, this is a full Android smartphone just with an e-ink screen. It can do anything that a normal Android phone can do, except it has that e-ink screen. So I could have just rolled with this in the same way that I would roll with my iPhone, and I could put all of the standard apps on here, but I didn't really want to use it that way just because of the fact that I had that initial bit of friction with the e-ink. I chose to use it more like a dumb phone that had smart capabilities in the cases that I would need it, but I tried not to rely on those things too heavily. The second thing that I noticed after using e-ink almost exclusively for a week was that not only did it change my screen time, but it also changed what was on those screens. It also changed what I was consuming. Now, as I said, with e-ink technology, this was developed for e-readers. It was developed for the purpose of reading, not watching, but reading text. Given that these devices have that black and white screen and aren't really good for looking at video content, I leaned heavily on text with my consumption online. Now, I love to read. I typically do read physical books, but I also do like to read, especially when I'm traveling, on things like an e-reader, just because I can fit so many different books on here. If I want to jump into one and read a chapter or something like that and then move on to something else, I can do that with a device like this. But a problem that I've had over the years is that I really have liked e-ink technology, but I wasn't able to use it for all of the types of reading I did, especially online. If I wanted to read a magazine digitally, I wasn't really able to see it on a small screen like this, so I had to go to a laptop. Also, because most of the e-readers available today don't really have a good web browsing function, you're not able to read blogs or other articles like that unless you download them yourself and then upload them onto the e-reader. That's something I really appreciated about the Boox Palma 2 when I got it, was that I was able to tether my data from my phone to that device or use Wi-Fi if I was around Wi-Fi connections. And I was able to go on and do all of the blog type of reading that I like to do. And I was able to do that on an e-ink device. The Bigme is very similar in size to the Boox Palma. So on the go, I was able to read articles on an e-ink screen if I wanted, and I didn't have to do any tethering because this actually takes a SIM and is a full phone. Now with the Boox Note Max, I have to say I really enjoyed reading on this thing. To have a screen that is essentially the same size or bigger than some people's laptops and be able to have that be fully e-ink, it just makes it optimized for text. For reading blogs or forums or Substacks or news articles, this thing is awesome. The result was likely that I got a much higher quality but lower quantity web experience. I think I spent less time online in general. I also probably consumed less pieces of content overall because I was spending more time more mindfully consuming the content that I was actually reading. You know, with TikTok, you're easily able to mow down like 100 videos in an hour, 100 different pieces of content that are high quantity but lower quality. Meanwhile, I might spend 10, 15, 20 minutes reading a long in-depth article, and I'm gonna get more value from that. At least that's what I find. So from that, I just wanna talk a little bit about the health benefits. You know, there's a lot of things said about the health benefits of e-readers, often for your eyes as well as for your mental health, just from the digital minimalism aspect. Is that true? For me, I would say yes and no. I would say yes, kind of, but not for the reasons that you would think. Now, e-ink is not magic in the sense that if you're going to look at it for 10 hours a day and not look at anything else, it's probably still not very good for your eyes. Is it better than looking at an LCD screen? Yes, I would believe so. The main reason for that, I think, is the fact that these devices don't need to use a backlight. If they have a light at all, it is a front light, so the light is not coming through the screen right at your face. It is not shooting into your eyes and, I guess, damaging your eyes, fatiguing them over time. But it's also notable that throughout history, people have needed glasses because looking at something for a very close vision just wears out your eyes, whether that's a book or whether that's you're doing some handiwork and you're looking very closely at that thing for a long period of time and not giving your eyes rest. All of that can be detrimental to your sight. Once again, though, I can see the benefits of these devices for your eye health just because they don't have that light emanating through the screen at your face. Oftentimes, I run these devices with the backlights completely off. The Note Max actually doesn't have any sort of extra light whatsoever. You have to use a lamp or the sunlight or just the ambient light from the room and have it reflect. That is the base of how e-ink works, and I actually like that it's not included. For the mental health aspect, though, I can see a positive and indirect one, though, that I'm not using the devices as much and I'm not looking at content that would bother me as much, because that stuff is often going to come in the form of short form video content or memes. If I'm going to see something that's going to annoy me, it'll occasionally be a news article, but it's probably something on social media or on YouTube, some sort of like kind of intentionally angering video content or something like that. And just because these devices don't lend to consuming that type of content, I haven't had a problem with that. Before I wrap this thing up, I want to do a quick review of the two devices that I used this week, the Note Max and the Bigme HiBreak Pro. Now the Boox Note Max, I really liked this device. It's such a sleek device. It feels very polished, really minimal design. I just found that this thing worked. I turned it on, it worked well, and it did everything I wanted. Now, I'm not a power user. I'm not looking for a ton out of this device. I think I wasn't trying video editing or anything like that on here. What I was wanting from this thing was just a large e-reader that had internet connectivity, and that's what I got. But to have this level of screen real estate and to be able to look at blogs or news articles or even just interesting forum posts, I loved having this. You know, like I would typically default to looking at this stuff on my laptop, and that does feel more tiring and it does just feel worse to spend hours on my laptop doing that type of stuff. But this definitely felt more intentional than that, and I appreciated that. Likewise with this tablet, I really liked the accessory keyboard case. As soon as I snapped into there with the contact pins, it went into a landscape mode and the keyboard worked. Other than doing the video consumption that I would normally do on my laptop, I was able to do everything else, and I was able to do it on an e-ink screen, which was pretty cool. The downsides of this device, one of them isn't a downside for me, but it might be for you, and it is the fact that this does not have any built-in light. So if you're going to use this in the dark, you're going to need a light of some kind from your room, whether that is a lamp that you have overhead, whether you have the lights on in the room that you're in. If you're reading this thing in the dark, you're going to need something. You're not going to be able to read it in the dark. I personally like that, actually. One of the reasons why I got this old Sony e-reader that I have here is because of the fact that it doesn't have any built-in light. I just think that's just an added thing and I don't really care. For me, the point of having an e-ink screen is the fact that it is so reflectable. Like there is no light on the screen, and as you can see, it is fully illuminated just from the window light that I have here. The whole point of e-ink is the fact that you don't need any sort of light to it, and for me, that's what I wanted to maintain, and I'm not sure what Boox's thinking was for not putting that in there, but I appreciate them doing so. The biggest downside for me about this is my concern about e-waste and the fact that, to me, this doesn't seem like it's very repairable, at least not from a user perspective. I think that there's no way that a user is going to be able to service this. I've seen on Boox's website before, they don't really recommend people doing any sort of repairs on their devices. They tell you to send it in. But I do imagine over a certain amount of years, they might not even have the parts and are going to be less willing to do that service for you if your device runs into issues. Now, I'd like to think that they're going to stand behind it, but at the same time, I don't know. Once again, this tablet is extremely thin. It's actually like scary how thin it is. You wonder if you're going to break it or something like that. But that also just makes me think like you guys could have made it a little bit thicker and you could have made it easier for me to get the battery out of this in case I needed to. Another reason why I went back to this old Sony e-reader is the fact that it was a more repairable device. It's easy to get into. You can switch the screen out if you need to. If you have some basic soldering skills, you can easily switch the battery out as well. That's all I really want to see from these types of devices, just the fact that somebody can get in there and fix this thing relatively easily if needed. And this device is really sleek, and that is a good thing, but at the same time, it comes at an expense of repairability, which I hate to see. With the Note Max, I also didn't do too much of the digital note-taking stuff. That's just not something I've really worked into my routine. I'm much more at home with a pen and paper, but I did give it a try, and I found it to be very responsive, and I did a little bit of drawing, and that was quite fun. Now, moving on to the HiBreak Pro, I'm a bit hesitant. I think this is a pretty cool device. I like Bigme. I think that they are trying to make really interesting niche devices. They're doing what Boox has not done as of yet, which is make a device in this Palma form factor, just in a normal phone form factor with an e-ink screen that can take a SIM card and make calls and do all the rest. I think Boox just released the Palma Color, I believe it was, and that can take a SIM, but only a tablet data SIM. So once again, it still can't be a full phone for you. It has to be a tablet with data. This is at least trying to be the full replacement for you if you want to go full e-ink with your smartphone. And I really appreciate Bigme for doing that, but I have found the device to be a bit buggy. There was an issue with Bigme earlier this year with a virus that affected Bigme's servers as well as these devices. They were able to come up with a solve pretty quickly, but it definitely damaged their reputation. As soon as I got this device, I was prompted to do a firmware update, which I of course did because especially with those security concerns, I wanted to make sure that I was up to date. But after that, I was running into a lot of bugs on this device. The first night that I was fully using these e-ink devices, I had to make a call, and I found that while I was making a call, it kept giving me these notifications that it was going to crash, that the actual app for doing the calls was going to crash, that it had stopped responding and I could close it or wait. The call was with a call center. I was literally on the phone waiting for something and I had to keep hitting wait. And I was worried that this thing was going to be hanging up at some point. You know, I'd been in the queue for hours at this point, and I'm repeatedly pushing, wait, come on, don't hang up on me because I have to start this whole thing again. If so, wait, wait, wait. And it was quite stressful. And I'm like, I had no other apps open. I just had the phone app open, which should be the simplest app to do. And it just kept telling me that it was going to crash. Another weird thing that happened was that as soon as I opened the phone, the Google Play Protect, it popped up with a little notification that said an app was blocked for security concerns. And it was the screensaver app for the phone itself. That wasn't super alarming because the reason that it stated below was that the app was probably built for an older version of Android and doesn't have the most up-to-date permissions or something like that. But it still was like a bit, what are you guys doing? It doesn't warm your heart that the first second out of the gate with this device, you're getting a warning about security concerns when you know that they had a security breach earlier in the year. You don't want to put your banking apps or any sort of thing, any sort of password thing on a phone like this when there's those types of concerns. And that's what I say about Bigme's reputation being damaged a bit here, because I do think that they are a good company, and I do think, from what I can tell, that their hearts are in the right place, that at least the people who work there are trying their best to make sure that people are getting these interesting kind of niche e-ink devices. Like, it's cool what they've put out on the market, and they're at a fair price as well. But with the security concerns and the bugginess as well, that I think probably is related to the security concerns, I can't recommend this device at this time. I think it is a really cool effort, and I hope that Bigme continues to work on this thing and perfect this thing, because I like what they're doing here, but I just don't think that this is, I wouldn't want to switch to this full time. Honestly, folks, if I can tell you how I'm going to continue after this week of using e-ink only, which devices are going to stay and which ones I'm not going to be working into my full-time workflow, I think I'm going to continue with the Boox, but I'm going to leave the Bigme behind for now. Overall, folks, I am happy to see that companies are putting so much work into this e-ink space. I think it is a very cool technology. I don't think it's ever going to replace my LCD screen as the main technology that I use to interface with the internet. I think I'm going to want color. I think I'm going to want normal refresh rates for some things. But I do think that there is a spot for this type of device, specifically a larger device like the Note Max, in my day-to-day workflow. I hope you enjoyed this video, folks. This has been my experience going all in on e-ink for a week and my thoughts in doing so. Let me know in the comments if this is something that you are interested in doing in your own life, or if you just want to integrate some more e-ink into your life. If you have an e-ink device that you're using and really benefiting from already that I didn't mention today, then feel free to recommend it in the comments below. I'd always love to hear from you on that. Thank you again to Bigme and Boox for sending these devices out. I really appreciate both of your efforts in the e-ink space, and I can't wait to see what you come up with next. And thank you again for watching, folks. I will see you in the next one.